knowing what comforts you. So do you like hot tea? Do you like a warm bath? Do you like walking outside and getting some fresh air? Knowing what works and being able to have that readily available to you can help with depression.
Job Insights, a podcast to help you carve out your career pathway and enhance the opportunities for gainful employment.
If you don't feel, you don't heal. It just basically means if you don't have an outlet for your emotions, whatever they may be, and I'm going to tell you right now that every emotion you have is normal and valid, and it's okay.
To help you navigate the employment world and give you job insights and enhance the opportunities to choose the career you want. So there's not one out there called Pull Up Your Bootstraps, is there?
Nope.
You can Google that, Jeff, see what you come up with.
And you can find the Job Insights podcast on blindabilities.com, part of the Blind Abilities Network, with hosts Serina, Gilbert, and myself, Jeff Thompson. And you can contact us by email at jobinsights@blindabilities.com. Leave us some feedback or suggest some topics that we cover on Twitter at JobInsightsVIP. And check out the Job Insights support group on Facebook, where you can learn, share, advise, and interact with the Job Insights community.
If you have the right support system, which is a crucial key when it comes to self-care and adjusting, if you have a good support system and have some professionals involved to help, such as rehabilitation counselors or low vision specialists, things like that, that definitely helps remove some of those emotional or mental barriers that might come up when we're working towards adjusting.
Learn about resources for training, education, and employment opportunities.
It's also good practice, like you just said, to work with someone that we may not mesh with very well because it teaches us. It's a learning experience.
Exactly. Right, Jeff?
Huh. And now please welcome Serina, Gilbert, and Jeff Thompson with Job Insights. How are you doing, Serina?
I'm doing great, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm getting this feeling that people want me to get older.
I wonder what special day is coming up for you.
I don't know, but I think I'll be eating cake soon.
Your present's in the mail. It's coming via that Amazon.
Blind Matter too, right?
Yeah, Blind Matter.
It'll be here by next birthday. Perfect.
If you don't get it this week, don't worry.
Well, this week. Yeah, this week, right?
This week.
We do have a guest on the show, and we're going to be talking to Beth Gustin, and she's a national certified counselor, and she's from Colorado, and so is Serina, and I'm from Minnesota. How are y'all doing?
I'm great. Welcome, Beth. We are super excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So today we are taking a break from our traditional topics with the Job Insights podcast to touch a little on self-care and how to take care of yourself during the job search and also when coping with blindness or visual impairment. One thing that many people that aren't really close to me don't realize is that I too sometimes have some not so fun feelings about being visually impaired and not being able to drive and things like that. And I think it's important for all of us to learn a little bit of techniques and to get some tips for working through that.
Beth, do you want to tell a little bit about your occupation and what you do?
Sure. So I am a licensed professional counselor, mental health therapist, and I work in the community mental health field. I currently work with ages 8 and up. Prior to that, I worked at another community mental health agency working with just adults. Before that, I worked at the Center for People with Disabilities, and I facilitated their low vision support groups and was the manager of their senior low vision program. I've also done hospice volunteer work for about 8 years. I no longer do that at this point in time, but I have done that. I've done some volunteer work at a homeless shelter and then adult daycare as well. I have my master's degree in counseling psychology and counselor education, which you have to have your master's degree in order to become a licensed professional counselor.
That's a lot of stuff, Beth.
If you take away nothing from this podcast, there's 3 things I want people to take away. And that is, number 1, keep a sense of humor. That is a must. Otherwise, it makes this road to employment and maintaining employment much more difficult. So it's okay to be cheesy. It's okay to make jokes. I make stupid jokes all the time, but it's how I cope. Number 2, you are your own best advocate, and you need to become your own best advocate because no one knows what you need more than you do. And so having the skills to ask for help if needed, having the skills to know what technology will help you in your job search and your employment, and being able to explain that to your future employer or your current employer, those types of things are really helpful for making that transition much easier. And number 3, if you don't feel, you don't heal. So you need to find out whatever emotions are coming up for you, whether it's anger, whether it's grief, which can include anger, whether it's anxiety, depression, whatever it is. That's where the self-care piece comes in, and making sure you have outlets and ways that you can express those emotions so you don't hold them in.
I think that's great, Beth.
I hope it's helpful.
So as you guys can tell, Beth has a lot of experience, not only working with individuals with disabilities, but it sounds like young adults and adolescents as well, because you said you work with 8 and up.
I do. I've had this current job for about 6 months. So that's a newer population to me.
Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit more about your experience working with the Center for People with Disabilities.
It's an independent living center. We had a multitude of different programs, but I happened to work for the senior low vision program. So we worked with individuals, I believe it was ages 55 and up. And the average age when I was there was around 85 years of age. And so we would help them, the individuals who were losing their sight, we would help them adjust to losing their sight, help them relearn or learn new ways of doing the same things they'd always done. Because as we lose our sight, as some of us know, we have to adapt and find new ways to do the same things we've always done. So whether it was showing them how to mark their appliances so that they could still do the laundry and cook and things like that, whether it was teaching them technology so they could learn to use iPhones or computers, anything and everything to help them either individually or in a group setting to stay independent and maintain their quality of life.
So many of those individuals you're working with, was it a lot of individuals that acquired their low vision or blindness a little bit later in life?
Yes, the majority had macular degeneration or something along those lines.
So what were some of the common themes that you saw working with that population in regards to transitioning into losing their sight?
Most of them had extremely positive attitudes. Given if they had macular degeneration, they would never totally lose their sight. I think that helped some of them regain some of the confidence that can sometimes be lost when we first lose our sight. I saw a lot of anxiety, mainly, when I worked with them, just as far as learning how to, like I said before, continue to do the things they've always done, just learning how to do them differently. And so a lot of the work was just helping them regain their confidence or maintain their confidence and work with the anxiety. There was some symptoms of depression initially when we first hear that we are diagnosed with vision loss of any kind. I think there's a little bit of, oh my gosh, what's this mean for me? How's my life going to look? And so people might tend to isolate at first. People might tend to have a sense of initial hopelessness or helplessness. But if you have the right support system, which is a crucial key when it comes to self-care and adjusting, if you have a good support system and have some professionals involved to help, such as rehabilitation counselors or low vision specialists, things like that, that definitely helps remove some of those emotional or mental barriers that might come up when we're working towards adjusting.
Beth, do you feel that you being blind yourself acts as some form of role model to the clients?
They said it did. I think it definitely helped because I could relate on a different level. I've been blind since birth and I've had light perception, although I've lost almost all of that over the past 3 to 5 years. But I think still having been born blind, it gave me an understanding. It's very different being born blind versus losing your sight later in life, but we still have to adapt and find different ways of doing things. And so having those different ways of doing things already working for me, it I think helped all of us relate on a similar level and gave us a common thread with which to work from.
I noticed that you had said that a lot of anxiety comes more so stemming from how am I going to do this now? Something that I've always done visually. And Jeff and I have talked about this a lot on our previous episodes in regards to making sure you're taking advantage of those training opportunities and partnerships and support systems like you mentioned to be able to help support you and being able to develop those new skills. Just doing the same thing you've always done differently. The only thing you might not be able to still do is actually physically drive a car until you get that self-driving car going. But other than that, I think you can do almost anything just differently.
Right. And you can drive, just not legally. But I wouldn't doing it.
We're not going there.
No, not going there. You're right, though. I mean, I think it's just that fear of like, how am I going to do this? And one of the things I always told working with the seniors back then was your brain remembers. So if you can close your eyes and kind of let your hands and your brain sort of guide you through the motions, it takes a lot of the pressure off yourself.
Mm-hmm. Now, Beth, you mentioned 3 major points, and one was advocacy. Self-advocacy, I believe it was. Can you talk about that?
Sure. And I definitely think about this when we're talking about students transitioning from high school to college or transitioning into the workforce, knowing what you need and knowing how to ask for it. So it's a hard skill to learn, I think, especially if we're not outgoing by nature or don't feel like we have a lot of confidence, to say, hey, Mr. Smith, I'm going to be in your level 101 history class, and it'd be very helpful if you could read what you're saying as you write it on the board because I cannot see the board. to kind of take that lead, I guess, in your life. For me, I personally found it helpful to go down to the college campus, and I happened to go to grad school and undergrad on the same campus, which helped. But going early and trying to meet the professors, introducing myself, and meeting with the Disability Student Services Center and letting them know who I was and what I would need ahead of time before class started, so that I would have a smoother transition into class. Similarly, when we're looking at employment opportunities, being able to help an employer understand what accommodations you might need and explain to them, getting to my job is my problem. So transportation is my worry, not yours, because some employers will ask about that. Helping them understand that, hey, can we maybe throw some clear Braille markers on the microwave if Braille is something that we utilize so that we can heat up our lunch, not have to ask someone for that. Asking them specifically, if you orient me to my surroundings, can you please describe either with a clock face where things are located or letting me go touch the items so that I can learn where things are, but just being very specific in asking for what you need.
And I think that you'll find if you're super specific and just ask, almost everyone is super willing to help you out, especially in an employment site. I've never had anyone say like, no, I don't have time for that. Or because the reality is that little bit of time that's invested at the beginning allows you to have that independence for however long you choose to stay with that employer.
I agree.
Beth, the first thing you mentioned was keeping a sense of humor.
Yes.
Can you talk about that one?
I think it's extremely important to be able to laugh, whether it's at yourself, at situations.
Well, how many things have we tripped over or walls have we ran into and just laugh it off and keep going, right?
We have to go out to the lobby area to get our clients. And at my last job and this job, I've done it twice now, I'll go out and I'll call a client and they sound similar to my client and they've got the same first name. So I'm walking back and I'm realizing this is not my client. You both kind of go like, you're not my therapist, you're not my client. And then you just kind of apologize and laugh it off and go get your client.
Yep.
But, things like that can be really funny if you let them. Running into walls. I mean, it took me a little while to learn, both buildings that I was in. I went to the wrong office a couple times. That's embarrassing.
Did you sit down at the computer and everything?
It's harder to log in that way.
Like, why isn't this talking to me? What's going on there?
I have almost, you guys will laugh at this. So our building has like a main lobby in the downstairs area because we're in a building that has a lot of different suites and there's chairs and tables down there. I have on multiple occasions almost sat on somebody and they're like, oh, hi. I'm like, oh, thank God you said something because I would have sat on you.
And that is something I wish that we could help the public feel comfortable in doing. Speak up. We don't know you're there necessarily if we can't see you.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more helpful for everyone involved if you speak to us before we sit on your lap.
Yeah. Unless it's Santa Claus. I mean, that's about it. I mean,
right.
Yeah, there's so many different times that even when you're alone or at a table setting and you stab into the mashed potatoes, put it in your mouth and it's totally something else. And it's like, there's a facial expression you give, but you can't give it away sometimes. You just got to swallow it.
Oh, I've had that happen before. I'm like, I thought I was about to eat a piece of corn and that is not corn. It's a whole piece of bread on my fork.
Yeah. But I like what you say about the public being aware that if they speak up just a little bit, not be afraid or shy away from an impending thing happening, especially like on the bus when you're ready to sit down, they wait until you almost make contact with them, yeah. So it does help. So if there's any sighted people out there or counselors listening right now, just speak up sometimes and it really helps out the situation.
And the same is true for if we are walking somewhere and don't watch us run into the wall. I mean, we have dogs and canes, so hopefully we'll find it, but we're human and we don't always pay attention. We think about something else and it's okay to speak up and maybe say something. Don't grab us or anything like that because that's not helpful, but definitely don't be afraid to speak up and ask, do you need some assistance or can I help you? And please don't say over there or over here or that way, or those are not helpful phrases for us. The more verbal a person can be, the usually better off it is going to be for all of us.
Yeah. And the third item that you mentioned was?
It was, if you don't feel, you don't heal, which is a therapy phrase. And it just basically means if you don't have an outlet for your emotions, whatever they may be, and I'm going to tell you right now that every emotion you have is normal and valid, and it's okay. Where it becomes a challenge is if we don't have a way to express them, if we don't have someone we can talk to, if we don't have maybe physical ways to express our anger that are healthy, like punching pillows or mattresses or going to the gym, if we don't have ways to express our sadness, maybe we don't have the words or we don't have the ability to speak at the moment, but if we can do it through art or music or journaling or something like that, again, you have to feel it. before you can heal from it.
And I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So everyone's super afraid of, the D word, depression, but it happens. We all experience it, whether it's for an extended period of time and it's at a clinical level, or it's situational because you've got some not so fun things going on in your life. But I did want to touch upon that because I think that that's more common in the blindness community than we all like to admit, because I see some posts in Facebook groups where we're not real happy about our situation right now. And I want our listeners to understand that that is a perfectly normal emotion, but it's also about, okay, so you're depressed because you're not able to get where you want to or when you want to get there. What are some solutions we can do to that? How can we work through that? And I think it'd be helpful to have Beth talk a little bit about the depression piece of things as well.
Sure. And I also want to add to that a couple of things. I think anxiety, depression, and anger are the three top emotions that I have observed in my work with clients, especially those with vision loss and employment challenges. And I also think it's important to allow yourself time to grieve and re-grieve. So by re-grieving, I mean, we may be very well adjusted to the fact that we are walking through the world with a visual disability, but it doesn't mean that myself or Serina or Jeff doesn't re-grieve like, oh, I wish I could drive. Oh, if only I could see my computer screen and not have to wait for someone to come help me because my technology isn't cooperating. Whatever it is, re-grieve, and that can trigger depression or anger or anxiety. By anger, anxiety, depression, I'm not saying actual disorders, like not an anxiety disorder or a depressive disorder. I'm talking about symptoms of depression or symptoms of anxiety. But experiences like that can definitely lead to symptoms of depression or possibly a depressive episode. I think the first thing is acknowledging this is how I feel. Are you finding yourself isolating more? Are you finding yourself crying more? Are you finding yourself more irritable? Do you find yourself sleeping more? Are you not eating as much? What are your symptoms? What are you doing differently that might make you stop and think, wow, this is depression? And we don't have to like it, but that is what it is. And so then how do we work with that? And I'm a therapist, so of course I'm going to say, go talk to your therapist if you have one, because I think that's one of the first things you can do to help yourself. Definitely rule out anything physical, any physical causes first, because some vitamin imbalances or hormone imbalances or heart conditions can mimic a lot of these symptoms of mental health. And so for sure, rule out anything physical, but then definitely find someone you can talk to, find a support group you can join, find an online support group you can join if you can't find one in person. Like I said, write it out. Journaling is extremely helpful. I don't care if somebody writes, I've got nothing to say for 5 pages. That's okay. You're still writing and something will come. Most times you're going to think you have nothing to say and you'll end up writing a couple pages because you have a lot to say. Music is a huge help with depression. You can find something uplifting that will change your mood. That can be helpful. Knowing what comforts you. So do you like hot tea? Do you like a warm bath? Do you like walking outside and getting some fresh air? Knowing what works and being able to have that readily available to you can help with depression. And then lastly, I always encourage clients to keep what I call a coping toolbox. So literally you get a box of any size that works for you and you put things in there that no matter what you pull out, it'll help you. And you can keep this by your bed. You can keep this in your living room. If you are someone who's sighted listening, you can keep one in your car. But anywhere that's easily accessible to you. And you can put things in there like a scent or aroma that is pleasing to you and makes you feel more calm and relaxed. You can put a CD, if those even still exist for most of us, or some kind of MP3 player where you can listen to music and songs that you know are going to make you feel better. You can put in there maybe a bag of your favorite coffee or a couple tea bags, whatever it's going to be. Anything that's going to help you feel better. So there's no question asked. It'll help.
Those are some really good points. And I think one of the things that Serina struck on was that the D word, society's expectations, when you feel that they're looking upon you to admit that you have depression or to admit you have anxiety, or it's just always expected that I'm okay. So I'm glad that you had all these suggestions for people to, I'm not going to carry around a Halloween trick-or-treat bag. That's not going to help me cope all the time. But that makes sense because I find myself, I like a hot bath or a walk or something, or working out a little bit. And it always helps. It always feels like I got an extra step in my skip in my step, I guess.
Oh, and I was going to say for me, and when I get depressed about, I can't just get in the car and go do what I want to do. For me, it's singing in the shower, cause I can't sing in my car, and that always helps me out.
And, depending on the severity of depression, some people might be in this place where those all sound nice, but I just don't have motivation to do that. I don't have the energy. And so I think about things such as, okay, instead of looking at your to-do list, can you make a list of things you accomplished that day? And it may may just say, I got out of bed and had breakfast. That may be it for the day, but that's still better than just laying in bed. And so it's finding baby steps that you can take to help yourself start to shift from that depression.
Beth, how important it is to recognize that you might be having anxiety or depression happening?
To me, it's extremely important because if we don't know what a person is experiencing, what their symptoms are, what they're feeling, what their thoughts are, what their emotions are, we aren't able to help as well. And so if the person can recognize, I don't know what's going on, but here's what I'm experiencing, it allows us as the professionals to step in and say, okay, well, let's talk about what you've tried or what used to work, or let's try something new. Or it allows loved ones or those of us in support systems to say, hey, I've been there too. Here's what worked for me.
And I think it's great that you mentioned loved ones and support systems, because I definitely wanted to touch a little bit on what are some good self-care tips for our family members or our loved ones, especially in a family where maybe it's a husband and wife or even a mother and daughter, where it's a sudden loss of vision. That's something that's been dealt with over, quite a few years or born with and things like that.
My first suggestion would be to educate. Learn as much as you can on both sides, whether you are the one with vision loss or you're the person living with someone with vision loss. But educate yourself on their cause of vision loss and what it might mean for them. And keep the conversations open. It's important to have open dialogue. Roles might change temporarily or roles might change permanently depending on how one's experience is with vision loss. So definitely have good communication skills. Be able to talk about the hard things. Be able to talk about the fears that both of you have from a husband and wife team, because the sighted individual is going to have some fears and anxieties as well. And being able to just calmly, openly talk about those things is, I think, one of the first steps to successfully transitioning to living with vision loss. I think it's also important to, again, seek support. There's a lot of different support groups out there for a variety of things, and just finding one that fits for you. Get to know other people who are in similar situations, because maybe they're further ahead from where you are. You can learn from them, or maybe you can help someone else because you're further ahead than they are in the process.
Wow.
I really like that you acknowledge that it's perfectly normal for a family member to have those fears and anxieties as well. Because I think sometimes when a family member gets diagnosed with a vision impairment or even just a life-changing diagnosis of any kind, the person that has not had that diagnosis feels that they have to be the rock and the strong one and not really show any of that emotion and just be there for the person that's going through it. So I love that that's something that you brought to light here for us.
Absolutely. I think it's crucial that both individuals, or however many individuals, even if it's adult children or younger children, but everyone needs to be able to have a place to express their emotions. And I think it's also helpful depending on type of vision loss and what the cause is. But if you know you're going to lose your sight more progressively, start to implement some non-visual strategies early on so that when you do have less sight, your transition's easier and there's less anxiety. Definitely reach out to any professionals you can that can provide support and assistance, just so you can learn the skills that everyone is going to need. It can be very common that the sighted person wants to begin doing everything for the person with vision loss, and we don't want that. We still want to be independent. We still want to be productive and active members of the household and society. So allowing us to struggle, allowing us to learn to do things differently, and that can be painful to watch us struggle, but we don't learn if we don't do it.
Very well said.
Yeah, that's true. When you said being the rock, when I taught woodworking, the men would come in, oh yeah, they've done that, but they hadn't, but they would just say it because that's expected of them. And in my situation, I had to be the strong guy, but I come from a family of rocks and it makes it tough to open up because everyone is very independent and everything. So as the years go by, it's like a education process that just kind of evolves. And I think my friends catch on faster than my family did, if that makes sense.
At the risk of upsetting some people, it's interesting that you said that, Jeff, because you said you come from a family where the males are the rocks. And I do think that there are differences between how males and females might cope with that, especially if it's later in life. If you're from a really traditionally rolled marriage and you always do the driving and you always do this and you always do that, and that's taken away from you, I feel like that's going to be a little bit different for a male versus a female.
I want to speak to that as well, in regards to if anyone's ever experienced this, but if you are traveling with a sighted person and you have brought along your mobility aid of choice, be it a cane or a guide dog, we're not trying to minimize your role in helping us as a sighted person, but we need those aids to learn about our environment, to be more independent, and to, as I put it, rely on a sighted person more for the things we need help with versus the things we still can do on our own. So it's a balancing act, I think, of letting somebody be a rock and at the same time keeping independence.
That's well put. So, Beth, if someone may think that I don't know how to phrase this, but if someone's out there that may think that you mentioned I know it said ADA, anxiety, depression, and anger?
Yes.
If someone may be questioning about those three things, what would you suggest for them to do? Or contact?
Right. I'm a firm believer in, it's okay to seek some professional help if need be, just to get through some of the tougher times. Now, that could be a mental health therapist. That could be your local chapter of a blindness organization. That could be an online support group. Definitely seeking support in whatever way is comfortable for you, or multiple ways that are comfortable, but definitely seek support.
Do you have I know there's not a link that fits all. Is there a resource guide of some sort that maybe you can direct us in the? I just want something for our listeners where if they do feel like they need help, maybe there's a national organization they can reach out to that would help them locate a therapist somehow.
There's a number of those.
Okay.
So I'm thinking of the American Counseling Association, I believe, has a therapist directory.
Okay.
PsychologyToday.com has a therapist directory.
I've definitely seen the Psychology Today one. I didn't even think about that. That one's great because it narrow it by insurance and things.
And what you're looking for, like grief or anxiety, you can narrow it down by what you're experiencing. I can definitely put my email address in the show notes. If anyone wants to contact me directly, I can try to help link them to resources or answer any questions they might have.
Okay.
I'm willing to be a resource in that respect.
Well, that's awesome, Beth. You might get a lot of emails. I think the most useful one would probably be that Psychology Today because it's very accessible. Not that the ACA one wouldn't be, but it just the way it lets you narrow your search down. I think that would be helpful.
I agree with that.
So there's not one out there called Pull Up Your Bootstraps, is there?
Nope.
You can Google that, Jeff, see what you come up with.
No, I had a father and a father-in-law that was their motto. Tough it up, pull up your bootstraps, get on with it.
Sometimes that's not possible. No matter how much the person would like to do that, that's where mental illness and severe depression or severe anxiety can really keep us stuck. And so we'd love to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, but we need a little extra help to do that initially.
And I was going to say that is really where you can see generational differences in the approach to mental health. And I'm not trying to knock one generation or another, but there are certain generations that don't really believe that counseling is something that's necessary, or mental health, or even medications for mental health in that regard. And that might be something that if you know that you do really want to move forward and have that independence, that you'll have to kind of work through as well.
Sure. And different cultures have different beliefs around for mental illness and things like that as well. So again, it's finding what works for you. You don't have to go see a therapist, but could you go to the gym and, work it out literally? Because that can make you feel better. Can you find a friend you can talk to? And what about religious involved, like temple or a church or something, or synagogue? Can you go there and find someone to talk to? Or if you're not religious, but you have some spiritual practices, can you go locate someone that fits your beliefs spiritually? Because that can be just as helpful.
The next thing that I wanted to chat about is something all three of us have gone through already, is the super fun job search, and how sometimes it's not so fun because of the types of rejections and things that come through. And I wanted to chat with you a little bit about how normal those rejections are, unfortunately, and maybe some coping mechanisms for that as well.
Yelling and screaming works very well.
I like it.
It's a tough one, and I will share. It took me. This is why I volunteered so much at those three places I mentioned earlier. It took me 3 years after grad school to get a job, and it was a long, stressful, sometimes depression-filled 3 years because it was just hard. And so for me, I threw myself into volunteer work. I had a couple reasons for that. One is if you don't receive your 2,000 hours, and this may have changed. I've been licensed since 2010. This may have changed. But back then, if you didn't receive your 2,000 hours within 5 years, you retook the exam. And I was not going to do that. And volunteer work counted. So for me, I volunteered my behind off because it gave me a purpose. It gave me something to do. It gave me a foot in the door. It gave me experience in the field. It gave me material for the resume. I found that to be helpful for me, just volunteering in the field that I wanted to work in as much as I could to gain experience and get known, because it does also depend a lot on who we know, not also just what we know when we're getting a job.
Serina, as a counselor, do you recommend providers, or do you suggest a list or something of that nature coming from a state agency point of view?
What we usually look at is what type of health insurance the individual that we're working with has. Many of our individuals don't have traditional insurance like through an employer, and I work with a lot of young adults, so sometimes they have it through their parents, but many of my young adults have Medicaid. So we do have the ability to search the Medicaid providers and make recommendations. We do typically partner with our community mental health organization that's here because they're really easy for our clients to get into because they have so many locations throughout the city. And then they have supplemental programs that they do with them that work alongside the therapy and medication. Things like they have a training program in culinary arts or in construction. They also do yoga and talk about nutrition and dietary needs. So they take a really holistic approach. So it tends to work really well for the clients that I work with. But I don't typically make specific recommendations to you should go see this specific person. I usually give them a list.
Oh, that's good.
Let them kind of make their informed choice.
Which I think is a much better way to handle that, because from a therapy standpoint and for any professional that you're working with, it has to be a good fit. And I tell my clients, it's okay if you don't gel with me. It's okay if you don't like me or think I'm helpful to you. I ask you to give me 3 sessions before you make that choice, but please speak up and ask for someone different. If you're not comfortable, this isn't going to help you. And so I think it's important when we're looking for professionals, whether it's of vocational services, whether it's a specialist, therapist, whomever it's going to be, make sure it's a good fit.
That's a very, very good point. Because I think that a lot of our clients think, well, especially with vocational rehabilitation, and this may be the case sometimes, I'm going to put a disclaimer out there. Sometimes you do have to work with somebody that maybe isn't your favorite person, because that's the real world sometimes. And sometimes we don't get to make those choices. But sometimes if there is a choice and it truly is impeding your ability to move forward, then it's okay to speak up, just like Beth said. I do agree with that.
It's also good practice, like you just said, to work with someone that we may not mesh with very well because it teaches us. It's a learning experience.
Exactly. Right, Jeff?
Yes. Experiences are good. I mean, I've actually went and saw a therapist years ago, and some of that stuff sticks with me as coping mechanisms, as we talked about. And it's just a reminder to yourself that, we all don't have to be perfect. And when you accept that you're not perfect, and you accept the things that you can change and the things you can't change, well, it makes it a lot easier, a lot less stressful. The expectations you think others have of you and all that type of stuff. So I like it. And I like this conversation. As I'm sitting here listening, I'm sitting back further and further in the chair, just listening. And it's really good stuff.
You are really processing, because when you listen back to this, when you edit, you're going to notice that I totally dished you there and you didn't even notice because you were so deep in thought.
I'm focusing, Serina. I'm focusing.
Listening.
I think Beth caught it. But
it is good information. It's good that it soaks in. And I guess I must be really wanting it too. But like when you talked about writing, journaling, I had a thought like Stephen King must really need some self-help because he writes a lot.
Man. I don't even want to know what's going on in his brain right now. Those are long books.
But I find myself doing that once in a while, is starting to write. And all of a sudden I write 3 pages and I'm like, what's going on here? It's just spilling out. And like you said, to release that stuff, have someone to talk to, share stuff with. Otherwise, it's like a canister. It could just build up. And where's it going to go?
We don't want the canister to explode. So it's similar to having a medical, if you broke your leg, I hope to the powers that be that you would go get help for that. And it's same with mental health. We all need a little help sometimes, whether it's the common cold or a sinus infection, we have to get antibiotics for that. Or it's a single depressive episode, we have to get some help for that. If it's a lifelong illness, go get some help for that. I guess I'm going off on the stigma around mental illness sometimes and the stigma around disability, but there's no shame in asking for help to get you through. And journaling is wonderful because if we can get it on paper, it gets it out of our head. So we quit thinking about it.
You're making us just reflect so much, Beth.
I know.
Because I was just thinking personally, things that Jeff's going to laugh at this, but hobbies help me a lot. And it's hard for me, at least it was for me, to find a hobby that I could stick with consistently enough. And that was helpful and accessible and all that great stuff. And this podcast thing has really helped me. It's something I look forward to every week, and it's fun. I really look forward to it. I have fun sharing and I have fun helping people. And it's certainly, I think it's helped my mood. I don't know. I guess you'd have to ask my husband. I think that hobbies can play a big role in that mental health.
There's a lot to be said around that. I'm glad you brought that up, Serina, because it makes me think of your podcast helps others. And so something I thought of, I'd like to do my own podcast at some point as well, because for me, helping others makes me feel good and does lift my mood. And so if I have something hopefully worthy of others hearing that might help them move forward or help them see things differently or help them get a different perspective, I want to be able to do that. And that makes me feel good when someone says, I never thought of it that way, or that makes sense, or something like that.
Jeff, you have a new podcast, perhaps. Let's add more.
Yeah, this will be podcast 396, I believe it is. You think I'd be cured by now, right? But you're absolutely right. It does feel good when you capture moments and you can share it out there so other people can hear those moments and they're archived. And you never know, like we'll get a message that someone listened to a podcast that was done 100 ago, but it connected with them. And that's what I just wish, I don't know. It's just interesting about podcasting, what it does for me and helping others. I used to teach. And so tapping into all these people, and you yourself, Beth, tapping into these people a little bit and hearing their stories and having them talk and all that. It's all ways of getting it out there. And, you don't have to be on national news to get a story out. You can do it on podcasting. And that's what I think we really like about it, that even us little people, we can get out there and make a difference.
Absolutely.
I didn't say you're real little, Serina.
Are you see, that one went over my head if you were
Earlier you mentioned you had the small Apple Watch.
ha 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 ha. That was on a previous podcast, Beth.
Yeah.
I missed that one.
So Beth, I have a question for you. Mm-hmm. What suggestion would you have for someone who is in that transitioning age, whether it's from high school to college to the workplace? You mentioned that earlier. What suggestions would you have for that person just headed down that journey?
I think no matter how frustrated you get, don't give up. As far as applying for jobs, that becomes your full-time job. Whether you're sighted or have a disability, it's still going to be your full-time job. And I think when we have a vision loss, it may take us a little longer. There's some great resources out there if you need some support with making sure your resume is formatted, whatever you need to help yourself be ready for the interview process. But don't give up. Keep applying. The rejection is going to happen and it's going to hurt. But don't stop, because eventually you'll get there. I wish I had a better suggestion than that one. I think it goes back to your coping skills. What are your coping tools? What's going to help you most when you do get down, when you lose your self-confidence, when you lose your self-esteem temporarily because you're getting rejected so many times?
So Jeff, edit this part out. Beth, I swear you must be bugging Jeff and I, because you are, I cannot tell you how much you are mirroring the things that we've said on the last maybe 2 or 3 episodes we've recorded, but not actually released yet. It's, I don't know the right word, but it's kind of nice to hear that we're at least somewhat on the right page with the things that we're putting out there.
I mean, those of us who live it get it. That sounds very cheesy, but it's true.
Hey, we like cheesy. We didn't know that before, but now we do.
But I think there's a common thread or a common bond with any individual who experiences life differently, if you will, than the rest of the population. Whether it's vision loss, whether it's hearing loss, whether it's mental disability, whatever it is, when we have people who are similar to us or have experienced similar situations, there's a common bond there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that bond is when someone sits down across the desk from you and realizes that you are blind, visually impaired. That commonality right there makes a connection, just like when I had teachers, sighted teachers, but then when I found someone else that was visually impaired or blind, I didn't know anybody at the time, so it really helped bridge that connection. I could relate and I could listen. And not that I gave more value to it, but it just drew me in faster.
And it's almost like if they can do it, I can do it kind of mentality. Not that there's not to like demean anyone or anything, but it's somebody's done this pathway. They've been successful at it. So surely I can do the same thing.
Sure. And I've had clients tell me that, well, if you can do it, I can do it. It's like, well, my disability is different than yours, but it doesn't mean you can't do it.
Yeah.
I think everybody can do it if they're given the right tools and the right support. It may take some longer, and some may have different goals they wish to achieve. I'm a firm believer, if it's not your goal, you're not going to achieve it. So make sure your goals are your goals, not your parents' goals, not your spouse's goals. They're your goals. But if you have the right tools and support, you can get there.
I have a friend, Jessica Cox, said, it's not can I do it, it's how can I do it?
Exactly.
So when you get to that point where you realize you have worth, you have value, and all that other good stuff going, when the ball's rolling in the right direction, then you can start thinking of the positives, like, how can I do that?
And you can start talking about when I do this, not if I can do this. Because if and when are 2 very powerful, different words with very different meanings.
Stop making us think, Beth.
You're focusing, aren't you, Serina?
I am.
I just love the focus of this podcast. You know, this is really one of those ones that is kind of hidden. It's not one of the obvious ones like a resume. It's wrong. It's right. Mental health, your ability to cope and to deal with things is very important, but we all don't wear it on our sleeves all the time.
No, it's also as unique as each of us is because we all present differently. Our symptoms present differently. Our coping skills are different from one of us to the other.
And I don't feel like I looked at every blindness podcast that's out there, but I've yet to see anyone really write about this topic or cover it. And I'd like to have it be out there more so there's not so much stigma with it.
Which is exactly why I want to start my own podcast, honestly. I'd love to get something off the ground. And there's a lot of directions to go with this, as we talked about in previous conversations. But I really think I've looked as well, and I have not found something. And I think it's an untapped niche that needs to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would definitely listen because I figure I just got my free session already today.
We've got like 3 sessions. Like, we owe her so much money right now, Jeff.
Shh. That's why I said 1 session, Serina.
Once I can find some office space and then, get the private practice going. No.
There you go.
We'll just Skype you.
This was a little challenging in the sense there's just so much content. And I feel like I've just touched the surface on some of this.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a lot of podcasts. You kind of look at the surface, and then if they want to go deeper, they can.
So, Beth, do you have any tips that you'd like to give some of our sighted listeners?
I have a few. One of them being, please believe us if we tell you we cannot see something. It's very difficult oftentimes to explain what we can or cannot see. But if we cannot see it, we truly cannot see it. And please accept that and move forward. And then another one I think is helpful. If you're going to rearrange the office or the house, please tell us you rearrange the furniture. Our shins really hate it when we come home and hit the coffee table that not used to be there. Or you're going to sit on the couch, you're on the floor because the couch has mysteriously moved while you've been gone. It's just super helpful if you could let us know that you've rearranged in our absence. And then lastly, I think it's helpful if someone can say their name before they speak to us so we can learn and match the voice with the name. I don't know about anyone else, but it's not super fun going, is that Brittany? Is that Monica? Is that Joanne? Who is? I know that person, but I cannot place their name with their voice. And so if you can say, hi, Beth, it's John, then in time we can learn what your voice sounds like. And lastly, it's a little embarrassing on our part if we end up talking to ourselves because we didn't see you walked out of it. So if you could sometimes announce that you're walking away, we don't talk to empty air that way. And those all may sound kind of silly or common sense, but we don't always think in terms like that. So just a few things I wanted to add.
Well, Beth, thank you so much for coming on the Job Insights. This has been a great podcast, great topics. And can you give us some information if you want people to be able to contact you?
Sure. It was my pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for having me. I enjoy talking about these topics, as you can tell, because I could talk all night. To contact me, I don't have a website up yet. It's coming soon, so I'm working on a website. But until then, if anyone has any questions or would like to contact me, my email address is BethG, as in golf, LPC, as in licensed professional counselor, @gmail.com. So BethGLPC@gmail.com is the best way to get a hold of me right now, and hopefully the website will be coming soon. So that's me.
Well, Beth, thank you so much.
I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed being here and getting to know both of you more, and hopefully being able to help others in the process.
Thanks so much, Beth.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye, Jeff.
And we'll see you next time, Serina, on Job Insights. And you can follow Job Insights on Twitter @JobInsightsVIP. Send us an email, jobinsights@blindabilities.com. We're part of the Blind Abilities Network, and you can find us on the web at www.blindabilities.com. And thank you, Chichow, for the beautiful music. And you can follow Chichow on Twitter @LChichow. And as always, we want to thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed. And until next time, bye-bye.
When we share
what we see through each other's eyes, we can then begin to bridge the gap between
the limited expectations and the realities
of blind abilities.
The realities of blind
abilities.
For more podcasts with a blindness perspective, check us out on the web at www.blindabilities.com, on Twitter @blindabilities. Download our app from the App Store, Blind Abilities, that's 2 words, or send us an email at info@blindabilities.com. Thanks for listening.